Morning, everyone. Good morning. Oh, that was good. We didn't have to do it twice. That was really great. They're awake. We're all awake. How are you? How is everyone? So, again, as you just heard, Yaromir Steiner and Denny Gerdeman are two of our tri-chairs for our upcoming Retail Summit, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we move forward. But our chamber is really committed to the retail community. You know, the sales tax brought in Franklin County represents more than half of the revenue generated by Franklin County and is vital to the operations of our county government, and everything as we move forward. So we're thrilled to again partner with Franklin County in producing the Retail Summit and all of that it brings to our community. Yaromir, we'll put you on first here, if you will. So why don't you each tell us a little bit about your backgrounds, how you got to where you are as the leaders of your respective organizations, and you know what really sparks your passion about retail.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I think that the background first is international. I was born in Turkey, educated in France, came to the United States 30-some years ago. In the United States, I lived in Houston, Texas, in Manhattan, in Miami, Florida, and now in Columbus. I think that diversity of experiences is, you know, makes me a little bit who I am. My passion for retail or for placemaking comes from, I think, where I lived. I mean, I lived in Istanbul. I grew up there, teenager, and then I lived in France, in Toulouse, south of France, small town. University founded in 1200-something. You know, I mean, it's cobblestones and cafes and things. So all the things I tried to kind of reproduce, I grew up in it. So that has been very important to me. The passion for the industry started in Miami, Florida, where totally accidentally helping a French bank work out one of their real estate pieces, I developed a project called Coco Walk in Coconut Grove in 1990, a long time ago. And until then, I was a construction company and building industrial buildings and industrial parks, a little bit like where Pisuti started in Columbus. And it was my first exposure to retail, and I was totally amazed, how difference can make, by the architecture placemaking, and I fell in love with it. And that project in Coco Walk is the reason why I developed Easton. Not many people know, but when I did Coco Walk, at that time, was called Limited Express, and they had their stores, and I put a store there, and that store became #1 in the chain by far, and caught the eye of Mr. Wexner, which at that time I had no idea who he was. And then years later, when they were looking for someone to do Easton, and my name came across, and he realized that I was the person who had done Coco Walk. That's the way we end up in Columbus getting involved in developing Easton.
That's great. Denny.
Well, the question was, how did I end up in retail? Boy, it was a long, crazy journey, I will say that, because I grew up on a farm in northwest Ohio, and the last thing I ever dreamed of when I was a kid is doing what I'm doing now. It was just a total serendipitous route. I was born with one of those brains where I could just see things in my head, how they went together. So I went to Ohio State, studied architecture, and I was working with an architectural firm here in Columbus that ended up getting the contract to do the design for the new office and distribution centers for the Limited out on Morse Road. Those original big black boxes, I was working on that. And I got to know some of the people inside the Limited in their store design department after a while, and one of the gentlemen there, Charlie Henson was his name, who ended up being my boss, but he said, "Denny, can you do some store designs for us?" So I did them with my office I was with at the time, and he ended up liking what I was doing. He offered me a job to come in-house, and that was August of 1976. That tells you how old I am. But that's how I cut my teeth in retail design. Never thought I'd be doing that, but I learned at the elbow of Wexner. We would fly around in the corporate jet, going places to and from, and it was kind of that epiphany that you get into something with, I love the energy, I love the speed, I love the change, I love that they watched their customers. They paid attention to what that customer wanted. And that, from a merchandising standpoint, I learned a lot because Wexner was really inventing the specialty store industry at that point with what his early concepts were. There wasn't anything like that. And I just love the buzz of it. That's how I got to where I am, and I've worked with a couple of other firms. And in 1989, we started our own business. And we have a staff of 65 down in the brewery district in that old ice house building where the smokestack, where the reader board is on top. We took that building over 17 years ago. This last week we moved in, but when we first looked at the building, there was a tree growing out of the top of that smokestack. Nobody had been in that building for 50 years, and some of you in the audience probably remember that because it was kind of an icon to have a stack with a tree growing out of the top. But we took it, and as we've grown ever since, and we do work literally around the world now. It's been a fun ride. It's an exciting kind of business to be involved in.
Denny, you mentioned that Alton Duty was a key source of inspiration early on. Tell us a little bit about Alton. He was a restaurateur.
Yes, Alton Duty was a former marketing professor at Ohio State, and he and Dr. Davidson and David Collett and a few others were marketing professors at OSU, and they were also doing retail strategy consulting on the side. And it was protocol in those days that if your outside business got to be larger than your teaching gig, it was protocol to leave or retire and go follow your private interests. So those guys did, and they started a company called Management Horizons, which at that time was one of the original retail think tanks where they did strategy, marketing strategy, and business strategy for retailers. And Alton was one of the 5 founders. But he became frustrated with developing all this great strategy for his clients, give it all in a book and explain it to them, but they didn't know how to execute. They didn't know how to bring it to life. So what Alton decided, he was going to wrap design around all this strategy. And he hired me to come in to help because of the retail or the specialty store design experience I had. And that's how I learned a lot about the industry. It was just working with him, listening to what he had to talk about from a strategy, from a marketing and a business strategy standpoint. I was fortunate as hell when I was young. I got to learn the great merchandising strategies from Les Wexner, and then the business and marketing strategies from Alton Duty. Alton's ex-wife Sue Duty has Lindy's. The 2 sons, Rick and Chris, have a number of restaurants from Bravo Brio to Piata. So it was in their DNA. They all listened as well. So they've been successful, but that early training is so instrumental in all of us. I think you get that kind of set up your foundation, and you just, when I was young, I was a sponge. I paid attention, asked a lot of questions, and fortunately, it paid off for me.
It's great advice. Alton, of course, was one of the founding partners of the Hyde Park restaurants, and which are still vibrant and successful and doing well. Yaromir, you have a background in engineering, and which a lot of people may not know. So how does that part of your education play into your creation of retail spaces like Easton?
When you say engineering, I was trained in France, and engineering training in France will be different. It would be in America if I was major in physics and mathematics, would be a more abstract way of being trained. And I thought it taught me to think. A great person I admire in the United States right now is Elon Musk and the way he approaches the business. And he's a physics major. And I think that going back to first principles in everything we do is what, engineering helped me to be able to do. That is, if you think about it, here I am developing Cocoa Okay. That was a breakthrough project in the industry when we did it. And what did I know about retail? Nothing. I was someone who specialized in pre-stressed concrete and special foundation, special structure, prefabrication. But it's the way you are trained, and you can approach every problem in an analytical fashion. I think that's what engineering was helpful to me.
Both of you talk about a little bit the creative process in retail design. If you could take us behind the scenes and what it's like to design retail spaces like Easton, which is so unique and innovative, and what inspires you to create designs such as that?
Well, I'll take it first because it's probably closer to what I do on a daily basis, but he does it in more of a macro scale with the whole shopping center environment. But it boils down to understanding why you need to do something. You have to know why before you can accomplish it, and that's the questions we ask our clients. We ask a lot of questions initially. As I said earlier on, I learned to ask questions and pay attention. And I just call it active listening, because you have to understand the nuances of of your client's business, and most importantly, their customers. And every client and every customer base is different. We all think everybody's the same, but it's not. And especially in today's world, having a difference or some differentiator from your competitors is so important. It's gotten more important as time gone by. The last 10 years, fortunately, design is now really a strategic marketing tool for our clients. In the past, it wasn't so much. It was about design first and make it look cool and the customers will come in. Well, that is not the case anymore. It's much more about strategy, and psychology plays such an important role in it too. So it's understanding how all these nuances play in. The design is the supporting tool. It's the envelope that houses all the strategy and the psychology about why you do something. So it's important to have your clients really engaged. And I know one of the questions you have is about what kind of CEOs you like, and I'll tell you that when we get to that point. But it's
Thanks for not jumping ahead. Yaromir, I see you nodding. So you agree with all of that?
First, I agree with Denny. Everybody understands, right? I mean, I am not involved in designing retail stores. I mean, I don't get involved in designing Victoria's Secret or Gap or something like this. But I create at a macro level the environment in which, hopefully they prosper. And also being a spectator on the industry, so you learn, watching people. I mean, I certainly, with Les Wexner as being my partner, I see kind of what happens in his business. I'm always amazed by the amount of the attention to detail. I mean, you don't know this maybe, but for example, for just a simple set of cabinets that go against the wall, they will make like 6, 7 mock-ups of the full-scale design with slight different color changes, dimension changes. I mean, I will look at this and I say, what's the difference? I don't even see any difference on those 6, and they see differences. I've seen less when they set stores before opening, going in there, I mean, taking his jacket off and start grabbing mannequins and moving them to the right, to the left, putting them down, putting them up, getting them to reorganize the bottles on the shelves, that kind of detail amazes me. But I mean, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I mean, this is looking at it from the outside. But now for placemaking standpoint, now that you understand, grew up in Istanbul, Toulouse, and so forth, I mean, placemaking is really important to me. And in order to create a successful retail environment, and because you understand, you see Easton, so you can relate to what I'm going to say. In many conferences I speak, but people don't know. They think of their mall. I mean, they think of Tuttle Crossing, and they try to imagine what I'm saying. You can understand. The first criteria for us is the physical space, the enclosure. That is the dimensions of the physical space. That is what's the width of the street, what is the height of the building on both sides of the street, what is the spacing of the trees, the width of the sidewalk, and I mean, wheelchair cross, or how many people cross, and how many is the space between the tree and the street. I mean, we worry a lot about the physical dimensions of the space. The second thing we worry about is the furnishing of the space. That means that once you have that enclosed volume, the negative volume you create, how is it furnished? Obviously, landscaping is one of the elements, trees and their dimensions and their locations, but also the parking meters, or the benches, or the garbage cans, or the planters, all the little fountains. I mean, all this thing is part of the furnishing, so that's the second criteria. And then the third area we focus on, and you will see I never mention architecture, is really the surfaces people can touch. That is the first 10, 15 feet of the buildings. That's what we focus on. And frankly, those principles apply at Easton, but also apply on High Street. I mean, like, for example, High Street has some dimensional issues. The sidewalks are too narrow. I mean, all this can be adjusted, but for some reason it's not. It could be made much efficient so that, outdoor restaurant could have tables, and they could, so the placemaking, I don't want you to think that's only reserved to shopping centers. I mean, I very often consult with villages and cities, how to fix their streets or their sidewalks and things like that to create that environment. And then we furnish that space with retailers, and then that's what we call merchandising, and that's a whole other conversation.
The end of the day, it all boils down to customer experience. That's what we all strive to do. Make it a place that becomes a destination rather than just, something that happens by accident. You want the customers to know who you are, what your brand stands for, how you engage them with that brand, and over-deliver if you can. It boils down to customer experience, and Yaromir's a bit humble about himself, but Easton this past week was rated in one of the design magazines as the 3rd best shopping center in America. That's pretty high standing. So I would say, good done.
Okay, what's working right now and what isn't working from a design standpoint? What are the hot trends in design?
I don't know if there's any overriding hot trend, although there's business strategies that are being employed by the most successful retailers, and those are the ones that marry up online shopping with the store experience, so the consumer can go to the store, or they can go online, or they in their laptop, or they can find it on their phone. All aspects of the shopping cycle they can access. And the internet has like 10 or 11% of the retail world. Is that going to grow? Yes, it is. But we watch some of the demographics of what goes on in the categories that sell, and those things are still solid. The retail experience is not going to go away. What the big trend though is how you marry that together. That's like the $64 million question. If you can solve that, then you're going to be much more successful. And there are some retailers who are, I think, really making that happen for themselves. It's customer engagement and delivering at all points of access where that customer can touch you 24/7. It's being consistent.
Yeah, I mean, what works? I'm going to repeat what Denny said, but first, changing, accepting that change is permanent. If you think you will create a perfect concept and then it will last forever, then you will go bankrupt in 10 years. If you look at the retail world, tenants that 30 years ago, if you had 100 tenants, of those 100 tenants today, you have only 20 who still exist. It changes, churns all the time. So understanding change, and the change is part of our lives, is very, very important. It's also, it's important for me as the developer who picks the tenants, but it's also important for the retailers who have to understand how they need to change. They have to make also big decisions. Do they age with their customers? Like, for example, Talbots. It moves as people get older, they get older. Are they going to reinvent themselves, start the cycle? Or do you serve a certain age group and you stay with that age group? That is, you keep adjusting what you do. Like Anthropology, for example. They always try to appeal to the younger group. They don't age with their customers. And so change is one of the things. And from a technical standpoint is the integration. You are right. We make a big deal about the internet and its impact on retail. We'll talk about that later, and I will make comments on it. But integration of new technology is very, very important. Like at Easton, we continuously, even at the development level, integration of technology, fiber optics and Wi-Fi, and then, managing apps. And it's like, you have to continuously connecting the dots, and that's what's important.
That change that Yaromir's talking about, I think, is such a key ingredient to what retail is about. And thank God there's a lot of change. That keeps people like me in business. But it's always keeping it fresh, keeping it new, keeping it interesting. And I think Yaromir does a tremendous job with Easton. If you go out there and look at the changes going on constantly, there's always new storefronts, always new opportunities, new things of interest, more restaurants. It's like that whole mixed use of development that boils down to one big, great, fun experience. That's what we do.
And that keeps people coming back.
Absolutely.
Right? They never know what's new, what they're going to see that's different from the last time they were at Easton. And when we have visitors from out of town, one of the first places my wife takes them is to Easton, because they haven't seen anything like Easton. There's no shopping experience. Even though we live in northwest Dublin, we live in Union County, she'll take them all the way around to the other side of town to see Easton. So it's exceptional. Who do you both view as the pioneers, the trendsetters? And they're both too modest to say themselves, of course, but in retail. And who were really the created the foundation for the new retail environment?
Again, I'm looking at it from the outside. I don't have Denny's, inside view of things. But people I admire is like, and I'm not good with names, but the CEO of Whole Foods, for example, and
Last name is Mac.
yeah, Mac, yeah. And I mean, he wrote a book called Conscious Capitalism, also. And I mean, that book summarizes his thinking. That's a retailer who clearly understood that as a business, he has a social mission as well as a business role to play. And I feel that the introduction of social mission into in an organization's goals is very critical going forward. I mean, whether it's my personal company or whether it's Easton, there's a whole social agenda in the way we approach things. And we cannot be just a business about making money. So I think Mac summarizes this. I admire also Mr. Wexner. I mean, what happens is, I mean, it's like Easton. You see Easton every day, and then you say, okay, great, it's a shopping center. But it's one of the, I mean, I don't say that to brag about it, but it's one of the leading shopping centers in the world. People come from around the world to visit to understand what works, what doesn't work. And it's on the cutting edge of things. And we have less in town, and we take him for granted as well. But he's very, very cutting edge. I mean, the way he approaches retail and the way he continuously reinvents himself, continuously challenges himself. I mean, he tells me, I mean, partner at Easton, obviously, he always says, time to change things when they are not broken, which is very hard thing to do. I mean, when everything is working, this is where he says, disturb everything and reinvent it. Don't wait for the things to collapse before you make the change. I mean, I admire him for this kind of thinking.
Yeah, I would parrot some of the things that Yaromir just said. Early on in my career working at the Limited, we had 2 seasons of the year, the fall season and the spring season. So we always got our design concepts ready for each season and start doing the layouts. And we were never satisfied. Every season we had an update to the design. I thought, my God, like, what's next? My brain was on overload trying to figure out how to change change that perfect mousetrap, which, as Yaromir said, wasn't broken. But Wexner never rested on his laurels. And Whole Foods is one of our clients. And every store they build everywhere around the country is different. There are no two alike. Some of the formats and layouts are going to be similar, but all the decor, the design elements is all done to fit that local consumer, whatever community it's in. Like we have 3 here in Columbus. All the graphics in the stores are different. It's meant to feel like it belongs to the community. Early on in my career, I had an opportunity. I met Howard Schultz from Starbucks. He had 4 stores out in Seattle, or 3 stores. And I was doing some business out there, and one of the guys I was working with said, Denny, you should go see this little company. It's really pretty cool. And I had just finished a number of projects in Italy, and so I got what a coffee shop was supposed to be like. And I went to it, and I saw it, and I thought, this is pretty good. So I called the Starbucks, got a hold of him, chatted with him. I went in, met him, and we got along very well. And he says, I'd like to see a proposal from you. So I came back to Columbus, wrote the proposal, sent it out, and he says, this is good. I'll take this. I'd like to work with you. He says, the only thing I won't do is cover your travel expenses. And I took it to my boss at that time. I was working for a design firm, and he says, this guy's a flake. He's never going to do anything. If he doesn't want to pay your travel expenses, you can't do it. I said, but I know I can bury my travel costs in the proposal. He says, no, I'm telling you, I'm not going to let you do it. You have to pass on it. So I called Howard Schultz and told him I passed. I had to pass because of the travel expenses. But that was one of my life's lessons. Don't ever give up on a small guy who has a good idea. I still recall that when that happened to me, and we take flyers on small companies who we believe have an idea. And boy, if there's one message I want to leave with, like, don't give up on something little, because there's always some nugget there that's going to win. Today this past week we just did our 500 Starbucks store design. So we're working with them now. It kind of goes full circle, I guess. And Elon Musk, I think, is another guy. He's invented how auto showrooms are going to work. Auto dealerships haven't changed ever since cars came off the assembly line, and he's changing that model. I think he's a brilliant guy.
Of course, he's got quite an interesting dealership right at Easton. The cars are parked right out on the street. You could walk in and take one for a drive, and why not, while you're shopping. How would you each describe the creative process in retail design? Yaromir, you talked about how one bank of cabinets might have 7 different options. And Now we're finding out why it's so expensive, right? To hire interior design teams. But so that's all part of it. But if you can explain and enlighten us a little bit on how that creative process unfolds in retail.
That's a Denny question, really.
Yeah, we start off with what the brand attributes are, to understand what does our client want to portray to the customer. What's the personality, the tone of voice, and the tone of voice, how do they communicate to their customer base, what's important. Once we understand, the design framework, then we begin shaping what the design looks like. And for a good part of our clients, they really struggle trying to see how all this goes together. So we'll do tear sheets out of magazines. They'll have architectural styles, graphic styles, colors and finishes, materials, lighting, visual merchandising, fixture design. We'll put all this together into different kinds of looks. And there might be, for any design problem that you have, there can be 2 or 3 solutions that still accomplish all those goals and objectives. But we bring that together for our clients. And we start fairly broad and start tapering down almost like a funnel to get to a design concept. And then we refine it. In some cases, as Yaromir was talking about with the limited, we build full-size mock-ups in warehouses with all the fixtures, all the graphics, live fixtures, if you will, with whether it's technology in the unit or whatever. Run focus groups through to see how the customers react to things with the heat mapping, where they go. There's a lot of science into what happens in retail. We do nothing by accident. We design nothing without understanding why we're doing it, because it's just too critical. You just can't throw it out there and hope. As you all have heard, hope is not a strategy. Well, sure as hell is not in retail, because you can't take the financial risk.
I would like to mention something maybe, I think you'll find that interesting that retailers do. I didn't know that until a few years ago. Today, a retailer is capable of measuring everything inside the store, similar to the way they measure them on the internet, right? On the internet, they know how many visitors, how many people start a cart, how many carts get abandoned, how many average item in a cart, and et cetera. They have all those statistics. Today, there is technology, and many of the stores that still have them, where they measure the same things. That is, they measure the number of customers who arrive. They know how many of them convert into sales. They measure also what he called the heat map. Heat map is to determine how you travel inside the store. What are the areas, what are the counters where you spend more time than others, and because they show them on maps, in colors. Red is more intense than et cetera. And very often they have retail labs. Some of the stores are treated as labs where they would take, for example, they would notice that too many people go to the right, so they would move one of the counters slightly by a couple of feet to one side to see if my moving a couple of sides to one side changes the way people shop and what kind of conversion rates they get. And they measure conversion. Conversion is number of people in and how many people buy, and then the average purchase of that person. So all these things are measured. So when you come inside the store, you are watched. And today, in the lab stores, they can even, through cameras only, determine approximately your age. Your sex is easy, but also your age. So they know about what kind of customer converts at what kind of rate and things like that. So, there's more technology behind the scenes than meets the eye, when you just walk in an average, say, Victoria's Secret or Gap store.
And how does that play into the design of the entire shopping center? When you have competitors, many competitors in the same center, how you decide how close or how far away they will be from each other?
I use the principle of the Grand Bazaar of Istanbul. Built in the 1500s, basically the Grand Bazaar is a covered mall, right? Built 5 centuries ago. And in that mall, historically, always, all the jewelers would be on one side, all the leather goods would be some other side, all the rug merchants would be together somewhere else. And, so it was organized by categories together. In America, those trends were debated. Like, for example, Taubman, who's the developer who had done City Center for us in Columbus years ago, they were opposite. They believed that you have to spread the goods all over the store to force people to walk one place to another. And their typical design feature in a 3-story mall would be to go from the first to the second floor in an escalator here, but then put the second to third floor escalator all the way on the other end of the hallway to make you walk across. I don't believe in that. We at Easton don't believe in that. We believe that you have to be friendly to the customer, and you try to organize them by categories. At Easton, right, the high end is, where where Louis Vuitton, Burberry, and all those brands are. The young people are around the the station, around the cinema, H&M, Forever 21, and so forth. You go out, you have the furniture users kind of in one place. And the restaurants that are merchandised to match. You have Louis Vuitton, and then you have Smith & Wollensky, and then you have Forever 21, and then around the corner you have, Flipside, the burger place. Or Condado and things like that. So we organize the merchandise by customer affinity, so that, people find what they want. Because what we know at Easton, I'm giving you information maybe too much, but
it's great.
We know that the customer doesn't visit Easton. Customer come to a section of Easton. I really make it similar to Fifth Avenue in New York. Either you go to 57th, or you go to Tiffany's, or you go to 42nd, or you go to Saks, or you go to 36, go to Macy's. You don't visit Fifth Avenue from one end to another. And at Easton it's the same thing. Today we can tell you, I can tell you, given the parking lot you use, with almost 2 standard variations certainty, that's 99% certainty, the zone in which you are going to shop. We can determine that, and we measure that.
Yaromir brings up a really good point. As we design our stores, we look at how we make lower the barrier of shopping, making it easy to shop, making it understandable to shop. Customers today know what they're going to do with it. The foot traffic to various stores is down simply because customers have been shopping online already. They've done their searching. They know what product they're after and what stores carry it. So they go to the stores to touch, feel, smell, taste, whatever they're going to do. So it's more of a destination shopping process versus an exploration in general. So there's what Yaromir is saying is actually it works simply because you've taken the stress out of shopping and having to travel back and forth.
Actually did something that was customer friendly, right?
Yeah.
That they enjoy and appreciate. We see the headlines out there and what's been going on with traditional media, this digital revolution. I lived it being in traditional media for 35 years, and now what's impacting traditional retail. Now you said only 10 to 15% of actual retail sales are being done via the web and internet. But what indicators are you watching closely to measure the state of the industry, to help your more traditional retailers develop philosophies where they expand their sales to the internet and web, and how you use that to complement traditional shopping centers?
Well, we watch particular categories. In fact, we watch all categories. The sales aren't that much different. They're still there. People are still shopping, still buying things. How they buying them has changed. How the customer lives their life has changed. What they spend their money on has changed. Young people spend money on cell phones and other things. They don't spend it on buying the latest fashions. They spend it on different things. That money's still being spent. It's just being utilized differently. So we have to watch all those things and what's going to motivate that consumer. Customer insights is critical for us, is to understand the pulse of the consumer, the economy. As I said, psychology is such an important factor of what we look at and how we motivate a consumer. Nobody needs more stuff. We all have plenty of that. And there's almost, in my mind, and Yaromir even quotes it, he says there's 2 kinds of shopping centers. There's the needs shopping center, and then there's the wants shopping center. And it depends on how much disposable income you have, determines where you go shop. And I think most customers go between the two. They do. They go around and make choices that way. But there is no hard, fast answer for what you asked. It's evolving as we're sitting on the stage right now. It changes every day. That's the fun part of this business, why I still do it, because there's been so much more change in the last 3 to 4 or 5 years than in my entire career. It's like on warp speed change, and I think that's exciting.
One comment I would like to make, and that's an important comment, is that we exaggerate the impact of internet sales on the retail business. If you read the press, it was the retail apocalypse, dying malls and dying retailers, the end of retail and things like that. I would like to give you some numbers so you get a sense for it. Right now, about 10, 11, 12% of sales, non-GAFO sales, that's not counting cars and stuff like this, retail sales are done online. Of the 12%, it's almost 3 equal parts. 1/3 is mail order sales. You order medicine online, and that counts as online sales because the Census Bureau doesn't differentiate. It puts them in the same category. The other third is done by retailers It's limited brands, it's Gap, it's Victoria's Secret, it's Macy's, etc. That is traditional brick and mortar retailers who sell online. And then the last third is about basically pure online retailers, say like Amazon, for example. So that is what's happening. And to give you another number that will surprise you, the sales of Amazon in Central Ohio, Amazon, that retailer we talk about, the juggernaut and so forth, is about equivalent to the sales of the 3 Costco stores in Central Ohio, right? So 3 Costco stores do the same volume. So, the perception and the reality are not, the same. So isn't there a problem in retail, though? We are seeing things happening. Well, the problem that's happening in retail has nothing to do with the internet. It has to do with 2 things. A major income redistribution in America, which started after Reagan, where basically middle class income was taken away from them and given to the higher classes of income. So middle class does not have money to spend. 20% of the earned income moved from the 90% of Americans to the top 10%. And the 90% of the Americans were people who spend paycheck to paycheck. They spend all their dollars. So when you take money from them and you give them to rich people, the rich people do not spend the money. They don't need to buy more jeans, more shirts, etc. But we did not become aware, we, the developers and the retailers, of that was happening. That means that we continued building shopping centers and expanding retail in the 90s, 95, 2000, as if there was nothing was happening. And right now what we have is a major bubble in retail. I estimate through statistics, and that would require charts for the presentation, about 20% we are over retail. There are 20% too much shopping centers, 20% too many stores, which has nothing to do with the internet. The internet effect is 4%. You understand the problem we need to absorb is a different one. It happens that everything is culminating at the same time, and internet is much easier, to accuse or to deal with than explaining that we developers got crazy and we overbuilt America, basically, And I want to emphasize that. Then the question you asked also, you said, what do you watch to see if the retail industry is doing well? First, let's define retail. And what I'm going to say is very important for Columbus, because Columbus is the hub of know-how in retail. But know-how is not only about designing stores or designing clothes, but also is to know how to distribute, how to deal with supply chain, and how to be effective. The software systems, and all those things are part of that. So let's not identify ourselves with store retail. We have to understand also that we have to be very current with the evolving online technologies so that we remain relevant into the future. The thing I watch to know if the industry is in good health is new concepts get created. I can assure you, every month there are tens of new retail concepts coming. Many of them get launched online sometimes, that we bring them back to bricks and mortar. But I think the industry is healthy if you just look at the creation of new concepts that we see online.
I have 3 20-year-olds at home, and they've got their own lives, and they've got plenty of things to do. When they get older and have kids and live boring lives like us, they'll want to go to shopping centers, believe me. I'm convinced that's when they start slowing down and they need things to do, they're going to change their buying habits, and they're going to go more to traditional retail.
Just as a benchmark, America has about 24 square feet of retail per customer in the U.S. Europe is about, 10 or 12 square feet? We have twice as much as anybody else. In the 80s and 90s, I think the attitude was if some is good, more is better. And we got so much more than we ever will need. It's going to have to be shrunk down. And once that happens, it'll be right-sized.
I want to emphasize, 20% of the income went from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 10% between 1980 and 2015, in 35 years. 20% of the income declared to the IRS, this is not some statistic I picked on the side,
right.
These IRS tax returns, 20% of the income went from the bottom Americans to the top 15%, and to the top 10%. And 15 of the 20 went to the top 1%. But you understand that if you give more money, say, to Mr. Wexner, he's not going to spend, 10 times more in shirts and ties and things, and there's only so much you can spend. And that shift in consumer spending, that is the money that disappeared, was the reason why, Costco got created. We have outlet centers. Gap invented Old Navy, it's because we need basically to create, people still needed 3 jeans, but instead of buying them at Old Navy, at the Gap, they started buying them at Old Navy, for example. And that's the shift that happened. And we did not quite realize it. Because, when we build a retail project, we think 10 years out. So in 1990, we did not realize the consequences of our actions until 2005, and what we did in 2000 until 2015. So we are over-retailed. Internet is a good thing. It's another tool in the for the retail industry that we are embracing, at Easton. The ideal app, I'm trying to get it, but it's very complicated, but we are working on it, is for you to be able to go online and say, I want a pair of jeans, and be able to find all the stores at Easton who sell those jeans and be able to get in their inventory and find what sizes they have. So before you arrive to Easton, you will know that, okay, I'll go to Lucky Brands, I'll go to Gap, I'll go to Banana, and I will have my 3 or 4 I want to try. And because the inventory system of the retailers are standardized, but to capture getting into it and start giving that data for you, this is the kind of things we are working on right now.
I was going to ask what the biggest opportunities are for the retail industry. I think you just answered that question.
It's helping them sort. Making, again, reducing the barrier to shopping, making it easier. That's where it's headed. People are time poor.
So does that mean we'll see maybe more retail again moving back downtown into our center cities where, you both have to be surprised, maybe even amazed at the housing, how downtown has expanded. Absolutely incredible. All the residential apartments, condos, townhouses going up in our center cities.
I think that all has something to do, though, with the generations. The current like I'll use millennials as an example. They're not interested in chain stores. They want something that's unique, that's different. They like independent retailers who are maybe getting things handcrafted for them, or they're sourcing from other places that is not a chain store mentality. That's what they're looking for. They're wanting unique. And those independent retailers are migrating to the downtown areas. If you think about, Gahanna or downtown Westerville or Dublin with the new center that's going in, just like all these places are smaller, they're more unique. I just go back to when I first started in the industry, the merchants were true merchants. And I was at the limit, I would marvel at the buyers. They really knew their stuff. They really knew their customers. They knew what was going to sell. And now buyers they're accountants. They buy by the thousands of dozens, and they just hope that they got the right thing. They're not as in touch. So it's different. It's a different mentality because of the scale. That's why the independent retailers are being successful. And that's why the younger generations want things that are unique and not from a cookie cutter.
So what does that mean for a relatively new shopping center like Tuttle Mall? How's the future going to be for a...
They need to keep refreshing. That's the only way they're going to stay relevant. If they have the same, tenant assortment, 5 years in a row, why would you go to see? There's no discovery.
Right.
And retail today is about discovery. It's about exploring. It's about experience. And if you don't have that emotion, you're not entertaining anybody. I'm not going to go there. And I know I know I'm atypical, but boy, customers they want that experience.
I would like to echo this. The discovery is very important. Women in this room know. You go to Marshalls, you go to TJ Maxx or Home Goods. You go to those stores not because you need something. You go there to explore what is new, what do they have, what are their rivals, what did they get recently. That exploration is very important. That's why what we call the quick retailers like Zara or Forever 21 are also successful because they continue to upgrade their lines. Every month you have the merchandise, so you can go in there and continue to search and look. So the role of a project like Easton, for us is to create an environment where every time you come, over a period of time, you see always something new, something different that you not expect to find. It's like the difference between buying books on Amazon and buying them in Barnes & Noble. I mean, I have gotten personally, I know, into subjects I never thought I would have gotten into if it wasn't for, I was in Barnes & Noble looking at some books, then I go to the shelf next door, it's something else, and suddenly I get interested in a subject. And the retail is the same way. You need to create an environment where people come for something, then they discover something else that they didn't know, and you have to keep it fresh. Malls who do not invest capital and who don't continue to update their stores will become irrelevant.
We are rapidly running out of time, but we always ask our friend Mary Yost, the editor of CEO Magazine, if we've had a question submitted via our social media channels. Mary, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Don. Thank you. We have a couple of questions, so let me just start with one. Kelly Atkinson says that she loves how the two of you have talked about the people, the mentors, who helped you along the way, and she's wondering, how do you now pass along your wealth of knowledge to others, other than being here this morning with us?
Mentoring.
Well, we in our company's mission statement, we believe in obviously, making, creating better urban environments and better places in America, and we also are very aware of the fact that we can only do, Eastern type projects 1 or 2 every, 3 or 4 years. They are too big, so we share our knowledge. I teach classes at Harvard. I teach classes at Wharton. I speak at seminars, and we are open doors for any competitor in the United States who has a project similar to us, who would like us to critique it and work with them to improve it. I'm very active at the ULI, Urban Land Institute, because we believe that land use policies can make a huge difference in the prosperity and well-being of a region. And I'm the chairman of ULI for the next 2 years, which is lots of work.
I want to echo what Yaromir said. I've been told by high-ranking employees of Yaromir's who said they've been amazed to see competitors come into Columbus, and you will take them around Easton. You'll explain to them the whole concept behind the design. You give away your secrets, which is just incredible, especially in such a competitive environment like Easton. And that's highly, highly unusual, I would think, within your industry.
And for our standpoint with our office, I'm a big proponent of mentorship. When I was growing up in the business, there was no mentorship. You just jumped into the deep end of the pool and swam as hard as you could. But I don't believe that's a good way to learn. And we work with a number of the universities in Ohio, especially University of Cincinnati, because of their strong design programs, the DAP program. We probably have 6 interns at any given time in our office. And they're not just making photocopies. They're actively learning with our design teams. They're sitting side by side, getting engaged with them. We put them in client meetings so they learn what that's like. And that mentorship program or the internship program for UC, it takes those students 6 years to go through a 4-year program, because 2 years is internships. That's the best. Those kids could come out and go to work in the morning. They know how to do it. And we work with them. I teach classes at UC and Miami of Ohio and OSU. I believe in that. I'm just there.
While you are fixing this, I would like to say also, Denny has been, very instrumental in organizing this retail summit, which is taking lots of his time. There's a major effort.
Why don't we end? We can end by chatting about that a little bit. When I came on 16 months ago to the chamber, one of our first meetings was going out to visit Denny and Yaromir and talking about the retail summit, which for 8 or 9 years has been a half-day event. And Yaromir started talking about retail week. We need to have retail week. How was that? Was that pretty good? And all I'm doing is seeing the dollar signs flash before my eyes, thinking the chamber and Franklin County put this on. Well, we compromised on a day and a half, almost 2 days. We've expanded, we've tripled to quadrupled the length of this event, and it is an incredible lineup. If you are interested in retail, I imagine all of you in this room are for some reason, you need to be at Retail Week. And as part of that, I'm going to jump in a little bit. We're going to have a flash sale beginning today at noon from noon to 5 p.m. Friday. Hey, it's a retail summit, right? Why not have a flash sale? Tickets for this event are $400. We're pricing them at $279. $279. We're going to announce that the Chamber is going to roll it out on social media, on all our platforms, on our website. And so this is your opportunity to get a deeply discounted ticket to our retail summit. Since you two have been, you're 2/3 of our chairs of this event, why don't you talk about a couple of the speakers who we're bringing in? It's August 9th and 10th, Wednesday and Thursday, 3 weeks from now, and we're really excited about this event.
We brought in, it's not working, is it? There we go.
You could just hold it. There you go.
We're bringing in 3 other, really icon visual merchandising directors from around the country that will be speaking about how they got involved in the business, how their careers began, what were their motivations, things of that nature that can address what the Central Ohio community has. One of the purposes, I'm just going to get off your topic just a second here,
Sure.
but it's about the summit, is Columbus, Ohio, Central Ohio has so many world-class talents. And as Midwesterners, we're humble people. We don't shout from the rooftops, but damn it, we're going to change that. We're going to make some noise about this because I have so many clients that come into our offices from all across the U.S. and they say, why is everybody in Columbus? I'm serious when they ask us that question because there's a lot of world-class talent here that make significant changes to businesses around the world. I bet you 95% of the city has no idea that all of us exist. And we've all worked as independent silos in a way. We have to change that. We will change that. That's what the summit is about.
I really would like to emphasize that the retail, is it Hadley? The toy store? Hamley, yeah. I'm in England at a industry meeting, and I come across a toy retailer called Hamley's, and who is planning to expand to the United States. So I take upon myself to go and meet with them, and I tell them, why don't you expand starting Columbus in Ohio? I can help you with locations. And Ohio is the mother market for testing things in the United States, rather than going to New York or California where you spend lots of money and it will be financial no sense. And so I pitch them, and then I come back, talk to Columbus 2020, there's a brochure, and I'm telling that to him, and he says, Yaromir, I designed their store. So I had no clue that he did this. So what happens is, what we are realizing is that Columbus is really a hub. We talk about Silicon Valley of et cetera, of retail. I said the Scioto Valley of retail, because the know-how is very, very deep. We totally underestimate it because there's that humility of Ohio or Midwest makes that we don't brag about things, but we are the 3rd biggest market in the United States after New York and Los Angeles when it comes to retail, know-how. And it goes to very technical areas. We are talking about distribution. It's not just designing stores. We have maybe good models of malls, but we also know how to distribute, how to organize supply chains and things like that. And it's very important when that happens that you claim the mantle. So the things we need to do, number one, is to claim the title. Say, you know what, we are the retail capital of the United States. And have, or retail, or fashion, or ready-to-wear. We need to find the word. I still haven't found the exact word because it has to cover all those things, including the internet. And number two, then, among ourselves, we need to connect the silos. It is not normal that a friend designs a store in England, and I have no clue he did it, and I'm pitching someone something, and I'm finding that Columbus 2020 has actually a brochure about retail capacities of the region, and I never heard about it. So we are trying right now that really, to try to put that on a footing so that it will become, something that will work. For example, why don't we have, more focused teaching at OSU engineering mechanical schools about sewing machines or cutting machines, or become specialized in the area? Why? Our fashion teaching. CCAD makes a great effort in fashion, but I don't know how much it's coordinated and supported by the rest of the industry in town. And so these are the kind of thing we need to do. We need to take it from education to execution to training. You want to be known that if you want to get in this business, you come to Columbus.
That's a visionary, and. Jim Schimmer, the Economic Development Director for Franklin County, says, hey, for those of us who are old enough to remember, we remember Woodstock. He said, The Retail Summit will be the retail Woodstock of our generation. This is the only conference in the region specifically devoted to the retail sector, as well as to all the industries and institutions that support it. $279 starting at noon today. You have to be there. Make your employer pay for it, right? They'll pick it up. You need to be there.
The session's coming, really. There is a lot of good topics. You know, I looked through the lineup, and unfortunately, there's some of them all happening at the same time, because I'd like to see a lot of these. There is good content.
Absolutely. As was this morning. I think you'll agree. Yaromir Steiner, Denny Gerdeman, thank you both so very much.